has nothing to do with the video. I was just kind of excited that I have it, but yeah. So today we are talking about how to write better / have a better time writing. Yes, I am outside, and yes, the neighbors are probably gonna think I'm weird, but oh well. So tip number 1 is for overcoming writer's block. Hi, airplane. Okay, so the easiest thing you can do to get rid of writer's block is to change where you are. A change of scenery usually helps boost creativity, no matter who you are. For me specifically, going outside is the best way to feel creative and have an easier time writing. And honestly, going anywhere that is pretty usually helps me. I love writing like on a beach or in the forest or anywhere like that because I just feel so much more creative when I'm in a pretty place like that. Sounds counterproductive, but it's also really helpful to write something else for a while. For example, a short story, if you've been working on a long story. If you're working on a play and you're having trouble coming up with dialogue for your characters within the script, come up with dialogue for some different characters that aren't in your script, because then you'll have the flow of conversation going through your head, if that makes any sense. It's hard to word because, as you can probably tell, I am a writer, not a speaker, so there you go. Another thing that I have a really fun time doing when I'm having trouble with writer's block is doing character studies. Since I'm also a visual artist, I like to draw my characters, and I will give them, you know, different outfits or different scars and things like that, and I have to write down on the drawing why they have each thing that they do. And it helps a lot with giving your characters backstory and making them more three-dimensional. So now you've started writing and you need your work to actually sound good or read well because you're not necessarily reading it aloud. My biggest tip that I have for young writers that I've been seeing a lot of people need lately is don't use internet slang in your writing unless you're writing a story that specifically calls for it. So many people these days will write stories and they'll do things like they will write a sentence and then they'll write the character's response the way that they would like a Tumblr post. Like they'll enter and then go like star cringe star. And I'm like, yeah, buddy, I'm cringing too. That sounds terrible. Don't do that. If you want your character to cringe, then say your character is cringing. Don't just go cringe, because then your readers are going to cringe with you. Same thing with any other, you know, response. If your character's doing it, just tell me that. Tell me it straightforward with proper grammar, please. Speaking of grammar, that squiggly blue line you get in MS Word, it's your friend. Listen to it. If you have a run-on sentence, fix it. Nobody likes to read run-on sentences. Trust me, I read a book recently that was a translation, and I actually read later that the translator like died halfway through making it, and it was so evident because the entire book was just run-on sentences. They had sentences that were a full page long. It was just so badly translated, and it was frustrating because the story was really good, but no one likes to read books with bad grammar. No one likes to read stories or fanfics or anything with bad grammar. Check your grammar. It's not hard to do. You don't have to memorize the rules, just look them up as you're writing. Word will tell you if you got something wrong. All that being said, you should stylize your dialogue, and your characters should speak in a way that matches their backstory. For example, if you look at the PJO series, which I do a lot because I'm trash for it, but if you look at the way Percy talks versus the way, say, Nico talks, it's very, very different. First of all, Percy talks like a New Yorker, so there's a lot of slang in his language, but he also talks like an only child. There's an animal. If you look at the way he talks, his language and tone of voice are kind of a mishmash of that of a child and that of an adult, which is pretty consistent with only children because they tend to communicate with their parents a lot more than children with siblings do. Nico, on the other hand, has better grammar than Percy does because he's old-fashioned, but he also has a more childlike tone because he grew up with a sister, whereas Percy didn't. You have to keep that sort of thing in mind, and you definitely do not want to use your dialogue in the same tone that you do your narration, unless that dialogue is with your narrator and you are, you know, writing in the first person. Cliffhangers at the end of your chapters can be fun, but if you do it at the end of every chapter, it looks kind of stupid, to be blunt. use it sparingly and it'll be a lot more effective. And that goes for most tricks in writing. It's just like with vibrato in singing. If you vibrato every single note, it's gonna sound ridiculous. But if you save it for a big note, then that sounds really cool and special and it gives everybody goosebumps. Same thing with your cliffhangers. Keep that in mind. You need to balance writing for your audience with actually getting your content out there. So you need to know what age group and demographic you're writing for and write in a tone that would make sense and be appealing to that group. But also don't write like a sellout. That sounds weird, or it sounds bad, but if you write like a sellout, people can tell and it comes through in the tone of your writing. You have to write for yourself to a degree so that you're actually effectively telling the story in a way that makes sense to you and thus will make sense to your reader. Don't write for the sake of sounding edgy or older than you really are. If you don't know what you're talking about, it's going to come through to your audience. They're going to be able to tell. Whether you're writing for creative purposes or for school, the flow of your work is really important. And if you're not sure how it looks, you have to actually read it out loud to yourself. And if it sounds choppy or awkward, you need to rewrite that section and then read it out to yourself again until it sounds right. Alright, that's all I've got.